Hello there, and welcome to part 13 of Julian Huxley's Essays in Popular Science and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I was just getting into the epsilons, the process, how they're made, and the DHC is basically taking us round. And I was talking about how they muck around with the oxygen supply to create these creatures. So let's read on here. They were passing meter 320 on rack 11. A young beta minus mechanic was busy with a screwdriver and spanner on the blood surrogate pump of a passing bottle. So he's explaining the process here, because later on he says the surrogate goes round slower, therefore passes through the lung at longer intervals, therefore gives the embryo less oxygen. Nothing like oxygen shortage for keeping an embryo below par. So that basically stunts their intelligence. And someone questions him, but why do you want to keep the embryo below par? Asked the student. And he replied, the director's reply was ass. Said the director, breaking a long silence. Hasn't it occurred to you that an epsilon embryo must have an epsilon environment as well as an epsilon hereditary? It evidently didn't occur to him, as he was covered with confusion. The lower caste, said Mr. Foster. Sorry, the lower the caste, said Mr. Foster, the shorter the oxygen. The first organ affected was the brain. After that, the skeleton. At 70% of normal oxygen, you got dwarfs. At less than 70, eyeless monsters, who are no use at all, concluded Mr. Foster. Whereas his voice became eager. If they could discover a technique for shortening the period of maturation, what a triumph, what a benefiction to society. Consider the horse, they considered it. Mature at 6, the elephant at 10, while at 13, a man not yet sexually mature, and he's only fully grown at 20. Hence, of course, that fruit of delayed development, the human intelligence. But in epsilons, said Mr. Foster very justly, we don't need human intelligence. So the intelligence, the brain is stunted with less oxygen, and even the skeleton. So the growth, I mentioned the epsilons, their growth is stunted as well as their intelligence, and they have, there's no need for intelligence. And he's also talking about, sadly, though, well, according to him, they can't get them to physically grow, mature as fast as he would like. And Julian Huxley was discussing that in Controlling Growth, wasn't he? And he was saying, are the difference in races due to their own endocrine inner processes? And then we had, in this book, Brave New World, how they were commenting on the Negro eggs. Let's just go back a little. Yeah, the Negro ovaries, how they respond to pituitary. Pituitary, is part of the endocrine system. It's responsible for growth. So that's interesting, because maybe they're saying that they can get the black boys to grow quicker or something like that. So he says, we don't need human intelligence in epsilons. Didn't need and didn't get it. But though the epsilon mind, I think this writing's a bit blurred as I photocopied it. So let's go on to the real thing, the book. Yeah, didn't need it, didn't get it, but through the epsilon mind, though the epsilon mind was mature at 10, the epsilon body was not fit to work till 18. Long years of waste, superfluous and wasted immaturity. If the physical development could be speeded up till it was as quick, say, as a cow's, what an enormous saving to the community. So the speeding up of growth. Right. And here we're moving on to this awkward topic in A Brave New World, when they actually talk about parents, and everyone gets uneasy. And he said parents questioned the DHC, and he says there was an uneasy silence. Several of the boys blushed. They had not yet learned to draw the significant but often very fine distinction between smut and pure science. One at last had the courage to raise a hand. Human beings used to be, he hesitated, the blood rushed to his cheeks. Well, they used to be I can't even pronounce it, viviparous. Basically, they gave birth naturally. Quite right, said the director, nodded approvingly. And when babies were decanted, born, came their correction. Well, then they had parents. I mean, not the babies, of course, the other ones. The poor boy was overwhelmed with confusion, so this is considered something very... it's a very awkward topic. It's considered almost unnatural to even consider the fact of natural birth. And I'm not going to kind of go into it. I'm not going to read you the book out loud, otherwise it would be silly. But viparious reproduction. Let's discuss this here. Children were always brought up by their parents and not in state conditioning centres. That's considered so. It's a thing of the past in this. There are no families, as discussed. And I've went through some more stuff, fished through some bits. Here they're discussing, they call it a rudimentary sexual game. These is with children, like prepubescent children, young children. They encourage them to be sexual, call it erotic play. And it's absolutely normal. And there was a scene here where one of the boys didn't want to do it, he was crying, and they took him back to the assistant superintendent of psychology, it says here, to see if anything's all abnormal with the lad, because and it doesn't. I don't think it goes into here why, but as I was saying earlier, probably right at the very beginning of the first part of these videos, how Aldous Huxley, to me, he used little or no imagination to write A Brave New World, because it's all mentioned and quoted by his brother and by other so-called experts that are all part of the same group. And Bertrand Russell was one of them when he was discussing about sexualising young children in order to break the pair bonding process. And when you get them before puberty, it just gets programmed into them that's normal behaviour, and then they can't form deep relationships that cement pair together and bond a pair together, so that they make a family and then they stay with the children and raise a family, just as how that's the traditional way of doing things, isn't it? He was encouraging sexual activity in children. Maybe you can throw the paedophile thing in there, but he was serious. I mean, this is science. This is scientific experiments. That's how they think. So yeah. So he's pointing to a group here. That charming little group, he said, pointing, in a little grassy bay between tall clumps of Mediterranean heather. 2 children, a little boy of about 7 and a little girl who might have been a year older, were playing very gravely and with all the focused attention of scientists intent on a labour of discovery, a rudimentary sexual game. Charming, charming, said the DHC. Sorry, charming, charming, the DHC repeated sentimentally. Charming. The boys Agreed, politely agreed, but their smile was rather patronising. And later on, we read, from a neighbouring shrubbery emerged a nurse, leading by the hand a small boy who howled as he went, and an anxious-looking girl trotting at her heels. "What's the matter?" asked the director. The nurse shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing much," she answered. "It's just that this little boy seems rather reluctant to join in the ordinary erotic play. I noticed it once or twice before, and now again today. He started yelling just now. Honestly, put in the anxious-looking little girl, "I didn't mean to hurt him or anything, honestly." "Of course you didn't, dear," said the nurse reassuringly. And so she went on, turning back to the director. "I'm taking him to see the assistant superintendent of psychology, just to see if anything at all is abnormal." "Quite right," said the director. "Take him in." So, yeah, that says it there, doesn't it? And Bertrand Russell was into this kind of thing. And now I mentioned it, I made a little note here, I'm going to bring in a chap called Desmond Morris. And he's a very interesting guy. I don't think he's connected to any of these people. But basically, I believe he was a zoologist, but he basically studied animals, and basically was studying if you have animals in an artificial environment. He was saying they act differently than they would in the wild, and the same applies to us. He was saying we live in an artificial environment, and our behaviour is changed and modified to try and adapt to it. But he spoke a lot about sex and the natural pair bonding process that happens in human beings, because we take a long time to mature, as we were discussing, as Aldous Huxley was moaning about, the character in his book was moaning about that they take too long to mature, physically as well as mentally. There's a lot of physical maturity, so we're very vulnerable. So that means that more time is spent parenting us, and this is just the natural. This is just what it means to be human, basically. And so the pair bonding process for families is absolutely crucial. And this chap here, Desmond Morris, he wrote The Naked Ape, and these are very good books. And another one he wrote was the Human Zoo, and this is in the 1970s, I think. Very good books. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these and continue on with the Brave New World in part 14.